All right, so I'm the product manager at Elliptic. Elliptic is a startup. So when I joined 2 years ago, we were about 16. Today we are 70 and around 4 different locations. So the mission of the company is to enable the crypto industry and detect and prevent criminal activity in the blockchain. I'm aware I've said a lot of words, so just to simplify this a little bit, a few years ago there was a virus, a ransomware virus called WannaCry. So it shut down the NHS because they were unable to access the systems because a ransom had to be paid. And so we, using the technology that we have, are able to trace those payments in Bitcoin and tell law enforcement agencies like FBI, NSA, or Apology CHQ where the funds are going and who cashes out, etc. So today, what I'm going to tell you is a little bit of the challenges. So the first one is introducing cryptocurrencies. So for those who don't heard about it, so what is Bitcoin? How does it work? Is it anonymous? Bitcoin and other cryptos? And then challenges of a new industry. So as I said, I started as the startup was really small, and the challenges over time really changed. The type of data and the type of requests from customers also really changed. The third topic is output versus outcome. So this is a very important thing to me, which is, we can be very, very busy, you can build a lot of things, but essentially, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing the things that will take us to the moon? And lastly, prioritization and long-term planning. So it's kind of a hot topic in product management. And so I just want to share with you how we do it. Great. So without further ado, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. So hands up who has heard or knows about Bitcoin? Almost everyone. Great. So as end of last year, Bitcoin was the first one. So end of last year, there were over 1,600 different cryptocurrencies. So Bitcoin really took off last year. So the price of one Bitcoin was around $24,000. Everyone was buying it. Everyone was investing in it. And so that Bitcoin really brought a lot of challenges to this industry that's in its infancy. And so it's about 10 years. It's a decentralized currency. So what does this mean? When Alex transfers his money from Monzo to my bank account, Monzo knows who's Alex and knows where the money's coming from, and also knows where the money's going to. So this is a centralized system where everybody, all the financial system knows where the payments are going to and coming from. Now, this doesn't happen with Bitcoin because there is no central entity that can freeze the funds or that can change the quantity, or if you're paying again a ransomware or a terrorist organization, there's not really a central organization who's going to stop you from doing that. And this is a real problem. He brought another way to buy illicit products and services. And so there is, I'm sure all of you have heard about a dark web. And so dark web, it really grew a little bit with the cryptocurrency, because with the centralized systems like payment providers like Visa, MasterCard, and banks, they put their heads together to finish and to end child sex material, terrorist organizations, and so they do not allow any payments to those organizations. Whereas in Bitcoin, this is all possible, and so the illicit products like drugs, guns, and services like hitmen and things like that really started to take their way into dark markets. There's minimum regulation worldwide because it's a bit of a mixed message, because regulators don't really know what Bitcoin is, so they either ban it completely or don't know, so they don't want to touch it. And so I'll drill down a little bit more detail. it's a highly complex architecture. Again, nobody controls it, which makes it a bit difficult to understand and management. And lastly, is it the future of the open banking? So some people say that cryptocurrencies are what email was to post office. So, so Libra, which is a Facebook initiative, so they want to create their own cryptocurrency. And obviously, they united with a few partners like PayPal, Spotify, etc., to create a unified currency worldwide. And if you think about it, what this means is that if you have friends, and I'm sure you do all over the world, you don't need to convert dollars into pounds or etc. You just can use this Libra coin, you can send them the payment. And so obviously, regulators, financial institutions are incredibly scared of what the repercussions of these things. So a little bit more about Bitcoin specific. So there are 880 million addresses used, almost 450 logged transactions, and the market cap of $250 billion. And as of yesterday, there were 350 transactions a day. So there is some activity in Bitcoin. Kind of give it away already, but who thinks that Bitcoin is anonymous here? Who thought that Bitcoin is anonymous? Nobody anymore. Great. Okay, so that is true. Bitcoin is not entirely anonymous, and what I'm going to explain to you now is how the secret sauce. So how, from a very complex organization, from all the addresses, all the transactions, how do we make sense of Bitcoin, and how do we know where the payments are coming from and going to? So imagine this is the Bitcoin blockchain. So this is just a sample. Remember, there are 818 million addresses and 400 million transactions. And so this is almost like your sort code in the Bitcoin world. So there is an address that is yours, and using cryptography, you're the only one who can move the funds from any point. So if you, on this address, you have what you call a private key, and you can move the address from one point to the other. Now, we can't really tell where the funds are going to or coming from this graph. So the very first thing we do is we translate this set of addresses and transactions in what we call clusters. So clusters are groups of addresses that we believe they belong to the same entity. So I can own 5 bank accounts in HSBC, Monzo, Halifax, etc. And through some data science and complex heuristics, we're able to tell this is owned by the same person, controlled by the same person, this is controlled by the same person. And so from here, you can start to see the flow of funds between a group of addresses. Now, we still can't see who the people are behind this. And so what we do is we go, for example, to Wikipedia or a dark market. And when you try to buy, or you want to try to donate in a Wikipedia website, you have an address very similar to this. And so you see where this is going, right? So if you have an address, and we know that it's from Wikipedia, which is this dot here, because we know who controls the rest of the addresses, we can then conclude that the entire cluster or group of addresses is owned by the same entity. And this is basically what we do. So once we have the group of addresses and the label, then you can understand the flow of funds between all those things. And so if someone deposits or sends money to that cluster, they are in big trouble. Because I had a little bit of I didn't know the audience, so I divided this presentation in first Bitcoin because it's interesting, and now I'm going to talk about industry challenges. So because Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are very young as an industry, and there are multiple sides to this industry. So you have the exchanges who want to have their customers transacting Bitcoin and making money off of it. You have payment providers. Just looking at Tesla, for example, you can buy a Tesla with Bitcoins if you want. And so they use a payment provider who receives the Bitcoins and gives them dollars. That's what goes in their books. And you have law enforcement agencies, I've talked about it, who also use these kind of tools. Custody, so if you want to have a secure way to have the Bitcoins. And finally, this is what we do, is business enablement. So we believe in the future of Bitcoin and future of cryptocurrencies. And so we work with different entities, such as regulators and different businesses, to make sure the cryptocurrencies are possible in the world that we live in. Now, the problem with regulators is that every jurisdiction is different, right? So, you know, in Facebook, for example, they've banned crypto ads twice. So they banned it, and then it's like, yeah, it's okay. No, it's not, and then it's okay. So they can't really make their minds. And so from regulators' perspectives, it's really even worse, right? Because they have an entire country that they have to support and make sure that crypto is safe. But because it's so complex, it's really hard to regulate. And it's very, very different from traditional. And so you have, on the other side of the spectrum, you have the businesses who really want to make business, want to make money, but because of the regulations, they sometimes, oh, maybe this is going to be banned, I'm going to run out of business. So, and there is this very dichotomy between those two, and we're in the middle, the punching bag of crypto. And so, as a product manager, it's really hard to gather requirements from this, because you listen to regulators and they say one thing, you go listen to businesses and they're like, yeah, I just want a tool to check a box so that regulators don't piss me off. And so, how does this work? So I'm going to give you a little, I'm going to show you the tools that we use to gather requirements and the way that kind of it works in this new industry. So typically when you ask for requirements, there are a lot of challenges. One of them is users always solutionize. They always say, right, I need this button, and when I click on it, I want it to download a CSV with all this data because of this. And so one of the challenges in the product management side is to understand why. It's kind of the key question of product management. Why do you want this, and instead of this, why not that, and let users prioritize. So, and in this industry specific, so there is really no industry standard. It's not that. We can't copy the standards from fiat, from dollars in the financial system, because they are really different. And there's a different appetite for risk depending on the business. So if you're an exchange in the US, for example, you're going to have very strict regulation, whereas if you're an exchange in the Cayman Islands, then you might not have as strict regulation. So even the tools need to provide different risk scores depending on the jurisdiction. And additionally to that, gambling, for example, is illegal in some states in the US. And so you also need to make sure that we understand the demographics of the people who are telling us the requirements. Industry changes incredibly fast. I've told you this already. So a lot of people a lot of regulators change their minds. So it's really a challenge to kind of gather requirements and keep up with the industry. And I've started with this one. So users normally tell you what they want rather than what they need. So in terms of recommendations and the kind of things that we've done, so as an organization that is growing, everyone has, or almost everyone has contact with customers. So from sales, from customer success, and the challenge that I had internally was to tell them, right, I can't talk to all the clients and all the prospects, so you need to gather all the feedback in a simple way. And it's really hard when someone is selling to tell them, oh, ask why do they want it, and kind of do the product role as a salesperson, because the mindset is very different. And I'll show you in a minute how did I had a solution for this. And then, again, talking about demographics and channels and personas, so it's very different if you're talking to a person in Utah in gambling or in New York, because they have different jurisdictions, and demographics are also different in what they want in the channels. So some have meetings in person, email, and so the other thing that I found it very interesting and useful to use in the product. So this top two basically educational level in the organization. And the third one was something that was really useful to me. So in the tool, I mean, you can't do this very often, but there is, deep in the tool, you're questioning, is this going to be used by users? Do they want this? We have some people wanted it, but is this really useful? So what we added was a button would say, let's say, screen address. And then using analytics, you could understand the demographic. Using Google Analytics, we can understand how many people wanted the feature, how many clicked on the button, and so we can get real interest of a certain feature. The problem with this is that if you do this very often, because you're like, yeah, I clicked on all the buttons, they all say, thank you for your feedback, fuck off. Like, obviously, you have to be careful with this, but I find it really useful to get actual real feedback about the features. And so, going over the tools, so this is one of the tools that I use to gather all these feedback from different channels, different people. It's called Product Board, and so the way it works is there's an inbox, and you just can forward emails, Slacks, pretty much anything you want. And that here I have a list of features by product and groups. And so here you have the client segments that we have, so brokers, exchanges, banks, internal law enforcement, and based on how important it is for the user, it calculates a user impact score. And the reason why this is particularly useful from a feature level, in fact, there are two reasons. First, it helps them to prioritize. And so I can see, right, the ones that are higher in this list were the most requested features. And I also know that B2B exchanges and B2C exchanges are the one who ask for the most, who ask for edit and delete risk rules. And what's really powerful about this is that once I finish building this, I can get a report of all the clients that ask me for that feature. And extremely sticky if you go back to the client and say, look, I know you asked me for this feature 3 months ago, and we want to work with you, and here is the feature that you asked me for, or asked someone in the organization for. And this helped me and the entire organization to be a lot more stickier with clients, because it's almost like, I care about you because I've built something for you, so give us more money. Now, first part, we gather the requirements, we know what we want to build, what's next? We need to build it, right? And so, as a growing startup, I always had this thought about, right, should I just ship it and see what happens, or should I wait a little bit? And it really is the difference between a successful launch and a launch that backfires is just the word "just ship it," because I've had my moments. And so, when approaching this kind of situation, what kind of I was assessing. So, if I ship this now, what can go wrong? What are the risks? So, what are the confidence levels in terms of what we're about to ship? So, is this a button, a shape of the button that we're changing, or is this a feature that will change the workflow of users? And so we really come down to two options. So ship boldly. So if changes are small, there's no disruption. We are highly confident that we've done a lot of research. This has no impact whatsoever. So let's just ship it. And the reason why this is good for a development perspective is it accelerates the development. So the more if you stack up the things that you have to release, it becomes harder to then functionally test and do end-to-end testing. So the faster you release, the better it is for the dynamic of the development team. And the second one is more, ship gradually. Things that are likely to surprise or disrupt or negatively impact the users, like, well, let's do a little bit at a time, or try to, if you want to iterate on feedback, if you want to start small, like in Agile, if you want to just deliver a little bit, get some feedback, and just deliver a little bit again. And so it really depends on the kind of what you want to achieve with that kind of feature. Having said that, and with the growth of the team and the company, we started to do something else. So again, talking about the tools, we managed to ship gradually and people at the same time. So talking about another tool that we use, which was incredibly useful for me, was something called Launch Darkly. And what this allows you to do is to put all the features behind the feature toggle. So why is this important? So first, you can control, this is a real screenshot, so you can control the percentage of users you want to have access to a certain feature. And so you just build this feature, you don't want your clients that are upset, for example, clients who are churning, you don't want them to have features that work only halfway, so you may want to hide it from them. And so with this, you can build everything behind feature toggles and then start turning them up depending on the type of user that you have. The reason why this is very useful is because, again, it doesn't stop your development process. You can just like build. And so it just accelerated the velocity of my development teams. So, we talked about the requirements. We're talking about building it. What's next? Is this done? So the other thing we need to do is to measure it. So it's not just enough to gather requirements, ship the code, it's done, job done, not going to do anything else. So we also need to measure output versus outcome. So, 9 out of 10 times when I ask for product roadmap, and if I ask, even leaders that are not in products, the probably definition they give about roadmap is this a list of features, is a list of dates that are going to be delivered, is your roadmap. And this is how we started. So when we were 10 or 15, that's what we had. But then there was obviously a lot of friction because the technology team was like, well, there is this bug, and this can't really be delivered, so, and then I had a business, but you said it was on that date, and clients are already expecting it. And so there is this massive forces, and I was in the middle, not too bad. And so what I tried to create is a data-driven product management, and the one that you can have the outputs, so features are just outputs, are improvements that you're doing to the tool, but most importantly, I've flipped this. So instead of saying we're going to deliver a new user experience, or we're going to redesign the user experience, because there's a drop off when users try to upload transactions. So instead of that, we did it differently. So what we did was to define the outcome first. And so these are the driving reasons why we're building a certain feature. The outcome that you want from redesigning a website it can be because it looks ugly, but the fundamental question is, what value is that going to drive to users? Is that going to decrease the drop-off of users when they upload transactions? Is that going to increase the clicks on a certain feature? And so we started defining OKRs, and I think Google does it like this, so objective key results based on features. So we say, right, we need to decrease a percentage of drop-off, and like let's say users are, and I'll show you this next slide. So we had, this is our, I haven't showed the tool, so this is our user journey when we import transactions. So, and what we were seeing is that users were dropping off after one click. And so this is one of the outcomes that we wanted to achieve was, right, we need to reduce this, what are we going to do? And instead of telling the team what to do, we just told them the problem. This is another tool that we started using, it's called Mixpanel. And so this measures, I refer to Google Analytics, although they have different objectives. So this measures user journeys. Measures user journeys. So for example, when they, I'll show you in a bit, but when you import transactions, you need to click on a transaction, select which cryptocurrency you want to import. And then there is a journey. And so when I tell them, like, look, we need to reduce this. And so with some engineering and with some UX and UI, we managed to reduce that number by quite a lot. And here, this is also useful, for example, if you suspect that, for example, users don't click on export to CSV button. They just don't use it. But you don't know, you suspect they don't use it, but you don't really know. So if you add a tag using Mixpanel, you can then see the percentage of users that use that feature or that button. And if it's not used, just remove it, because you don't. Features typically need to be tested and just take a lot of time in the development process. Finally, this is something that we've also implemented. So if you want to be a data-driven product management, access to data is absolutely essential. And so this is one of the tools that we've tested. So it's a business intelligence tool that provides you insight about all your transactions, how your users access data. So it's a different perspective, not just from the UI, like Mixpanel, but also from the analysis results, so number of transactions, etc., etc. So we talked about gathering requirements. We talked about shipping it, shipping boldly, not, and finally measuring a few tools to allow you to measure what we do. Now, the problem I have with measuring outcomes and say, right, we're reducing 60% the drop-off is that you can't really sell that. So if you're in a conversation with a prospect and they say, hey, yeah, we are building great things, we are increasing by 10% the number of currencies that we support. They were like, what? That doesn't tell me anything, and we can't sign a contract if you don't know what features are you going to deliver. And so we had to come up with a prioritization and long-term planning. And this is mostly because, so business to business and business to consumer are very different in terms of product management. So in a business to consumer, if you upset one customer, that's not okay, but it's better than if you upset one customer in B2B that is responsible for 30% of your revenue. And so typically, in a B2B business, in a product management, you have also to take into account the voice of the customer. And so we came up with this kind of high-level plan. So the first part is innovate. So it's basically all the ideas that we had actually in product board from all stakeholders, internal, and this is a big bucket of all the ideas that everyone had. And then the ones that are good ideas, or you see, yeah, I see how this can work, they go to an explore phase. And so you have a concept of a squad, and And a squad is basically run by a cross-functional team. It's typically one dev, product owner, a product designer, and someone external. It can be a client or sales, depending on the type of idea, to identify, is this in high level, what's the market opportunity, the technical cost, and kind of the idea of this step number 2 is to kill the idea as fast as possible. Because as soon as you productize that idea and you spend development resources, then it's already going to be too late. So in the Explorer is like, is this, and I'll explain in the next slide, how do we decide what to bring forward. So productization is, it's typically what the job of a product owner is. Right, this is what we need to do. Let's discuss the feature, create the user stories, and make it a product. And lastly, things have to be maintained. So, when bugs come up, fix the bugs. And monitoring and little small features. So, but the challenging part, at least for me, is to decide when are we going to kill. Can we kill the idea or not? And so, and it's more about, not just about killing the idea, is to explain once we make it a product, is why are we doing it in the first place? And so I have different parameters. And so this is different from company to company. This is 6 of our different parameters. So a legal commitment, so typically, and this is obviously not, I don't advise this as a product person, is to close big contracts, we need to commit legally sometimes to certain features. And so, for example, we say, right, we're going to support Ethereum, which is another currency, and our prospect says, right, we only sign this contract for 3 years if you build Ripple. And so obviously, because it's in a contract, it's a big legal commitment, we have to do it because there's a liability. Second one is financial return. So this is a key one. So what is the financial return in the next 2 years? And this one in particular, you have things like, what is the addressable market? How much of that addressable market worldwide will we get? How many businesses want the feature that we're building? And so this one is kind of the most complex one to calculate, but also the one who gives you, are we doing £1 million feature, or are we doing 100 million, which will take us to the next step? Scalability. So as a startup that we are, we also have a lot of manual things that we're doing because just hammer things and we don't have time to do it properly. And so things like allowing customer support to create users, things that don't have a clear financial return. It will reduce the cost for sure, but it's also important to allow us to scale. Competitive advantage, it's also a big one. So we have a few competitors in the market, and so we're hiring a product marketing manager to allow us to analyze the competition and see what they're doing. Is this gonna, if we don't do this feature, we'll lose market share, etc. Critical for customers. So our mission in enabling the industry, the cryptocurrency industry, is also to help our customers to grow their businesses. Sometimes we don't have big financial return, but if it helps the community, then we do it. And lastly, technical risk. So is it high financial return, high technical risk, or is it low? And this helps us to prioritize. And so this is the end result. There's no tool is Excel, I'm sure all of you know. And so we have the initiatives, which are big initiatives. The stage, so is this in a productionized state or is this an explorer? Products, product area, and then these are the different parameters. And each of these has a different weight. when we calculate the sum to calculate the priority then. And so you have yes, no, or medium, which you're not sure. And then all these have then buckets in terms of financial return. I think it's above 2 million or something along those lines. And then all of these sum the points, and obviously the one with the highest points is going to get done first. So Project Overlords is the next one, if you all want to know.